Hi, I'm John Cox, and this is Vagabond Vox. Today I'm going to be talking about my relationship with alcohol, how I quit drinking completely on January 1st this year while I was suffering from a New Year's Eve party hangover, and then how I failed to sustain my quitting for the year just last week when I was on vacation in Malta. Yet, how I'm not disappointed about that. In fact, I'm actually quite happy about it, which might sound a little bit weird, but I will explain why. Just bear with me. So, I've had sort of a on and off again desire to severely cut back on or entirely quit drinking, especially for the last year or two, as I became aware through a couple different ways that I was definitely abusing alcohol. I would classify myself as a social binge drinker. What I mean by that is I could go long bouts without drinking at all, but I have a tendency to want to drink when I am socializing, especially if other people are drinking as well, of course. And then the binge part comes where it's rarely one. It's usually starting with one, and then it just keeps going until the night ends. That might be 3 drinks, 5, 8, 10, or more, depending on the night. And I would say last year, there were periods where that sort of binging was happening 2 to 3 times a week, maybe more. And this is still way less than I drank in my early 20s when I was in a band, but that's a whole different story. Maybe we'll talk about that another time. One of the most impactful things that I saw or heard that made me really start to realize that I had a problem with my relationship with alcohol and how I was consuming it or even abusing it, one might say, is the quite famous episode on alcohol done by Dr. Andrew Huberman. I believe he published that about 2 years ago, something like that. If you have not watched it, it's absolutely incredible. It's very comprehensive into the effects both on the body, but also on the brain and what the actual safe amounts are. And I use safe with invisible air quotes because if you watch that episode, you will see that there is, in fact, no good amount of alcohol to drink. The only good amount is 0. However, the threshold to pass in alcohol consumption, where you start to develop chronic negative impact on your body and mind, is only about 2 drinks per week, which for me, when I first heard that, I was like, 2 drinks, like that's 2 drinks is what I have while I'm waiting for my appetizer when I'm out to eat. But like that's just getting started essentially in one night, much less a cap on the entire week. It was definitely a bit of a wake up call, and I had long been aware of the negative effects on the body, but what really got me about that episode was what Huberman talked about with the effects on the mind, and it was really 2 factors there that really scared me. One of them is that chronic consumption of alcohol progressively lowers your baseline mood over time to where you need alcohol to just reach like a normal level of happiness, essentially, or presence in conversation. And that was really scary to me because I've struggled on and off with a lot of anxiety and depression, especially for the last several years or so. And the thought that my behavior was leading towards my baseline happiness and mood declining over time was quite frightening. And then the second effect on the mind that was quite scary is that chronic alcohol use actually atrophies your brain and kills your brain cells. And that to me is very scary because my brain is who I am. Like that's you are your brain, I think, more than your body, although your brain and body are definitely intimately connected. And I think part of your identity does come from your body and the way that you feel as well. But the thought of literally slowly killing off parts of my brain over time irrecoverably, if that's a word, was super frightening. And so when I first heard this episode, I did start to cut back a bit, but then I just sort of stopped thinking about it and kept going and kind of going back to my normal level of social binge drinking. So, how does this lead all to me quitting drinking on January 1st? Well, I'll give you sort of the short version here, which was I had a pretty typical New Year's Eve party with, staying up till midnight, lots of drinking throughout the night, champagne toast after midnight, et cetera, et cetera. And then on January 1st in the morning, I was quite hungover. And all of a sudden, a thought popped into my head, almost like an intrusive thought. And that thought was, I should give up drinking for the whole year as like my New Year's resolution. And right away, my more present mind came in and was sort of saying in my inner dialogue, whoa, a whole year? That seems kind of extreme. Like, what? I don't think we need to do that. That seems a bit ridiculous. But then I started thinking, okay, well, what are the reasons to not do that? And the only reasons that really came to mind was drinking is fun and drinking makes me feel less awkward in social situations. And I sort of realized that those are pretty weak reasons to not follow through on that and to not commit to that. So I decided, all right, we're doing it. Let's go for it. And I did reflect on sort of the primary reasons for me of quitting drinking, which was one, for mental health, to prioritize my mental health. I wanted to basically give myself a chance to totally detox and see if I could improve my baseline mood and energy and sleep as well by cutting out drinking. And then on the physical side, alcohol is an inflammatory. It also is a lot of empty calories if you are having many, many drinks a week like I was. And I've been working on getting in better shape this year, and it felt like drinking would be sort of counterproductive to that goal. So on the body side, like I said, there's sleep and also cutting some calories out of my diet. And then also on the financial side, drinking is very expensive, especially if you drink out at cocktail bars and restaurants. And in fact, this is a really shameful figure that I'm probably going to regret sharing on this video, but I estimated as I was thinking through doing this that I spent probably to the tune of $8,000 to $10,000 last year on drinking, which is an absolutely absurd amount of money to spend on alcohol. I am not a wealthy person. I should not be spending that much money on something like that. It's very irresponsible and silly and bad for me and a million other negative things. So that was sort of like just another cherry on top. It's like, okay, we're taking care of our mind, our body, and the bank account. And that's great. So my plan when I set this was to take a whole year off of drinking with the goals in mind that I've mentioned previously. And also with the intention that after the year was over, I would have a new relationship with alcohol where when I would drink, it would be sort of like a special thing, not a baseline thing that I must do every time I socialize, not something that I do mindlessly, just sort of sipping away on a drink all night. But I wanted to have a relationship with alcohol where I would really enjoy it and do it intentionally and not do it to get drunk or even buzzed, but just to have a drink, whether it's like a masterfully constructed cocktail or really excellent, rare glass of wine or something like that. Especially I was sort of envisioning when traveling and visiting other countries and stuff to kind of try whatever their local specialty is there. So as I mentioned, I did fail at my dry year last week when I was in Malta. But before I talk about that and why I did that, how I did it, and why I actually feel okay that I did that, I want to talk about my perceived results from taking essentially 2.5 months off of drinking, which is by far the longest that I have not touched alcohol since I had my first drink, which was at some point in my teenage years. I'm not exactly sure what age it was. So one of the first benefits that I noticed probably by the end of the first week is that the quality of my sleep improved drastically. I mean, I'm talking about going from, going to bed late, waking up several times throughout the night, acid reflux, all this kind of stuff that kind of really messes with your sleep. And then feeling quite groggy, quite slow and sluggish in the morning, sort of struggling to get up. That was sort of baseline before quitting drinking. And then by the end of the first week, I found myself able to fall asleep very easily, to much more consistently sleep through the night without waking up, either due to acid reflux or having to use the restroom or any of that stuff. Just be able to sleep really soundly, and then to wake up feeling very refreshed and well rested, energized, in a good mood. And speaking of mood, that is probably the next benefit that I started to notice after maybe a couple weeks, is I started to notice that my general mood was much more stable, if leaning positive, rather than being sort of volatile, leaning negative, if that makes sense. So another thing that I started doing at the beginning of the year was I started working with a fitness trainer who is actually a good friend of mine. He's got me on a great program that I've really enjoyed. And I would say this is the most seriously that I've taken any sort of fitness working out plan. The way that cutting out alcohol has helped this, or one of the ways, as I'm sure there are many that I probably don't even know about, but by being able to sleep so well, I'm able to wake up at about 5:30 to 5:45 every morning and go to the gym and have a really great workout, feel really good. I'm usually there about an hour and a half between my stretching, warming up, doing my weightlifting. And then I've been doing burpees at the end of every workout for the last 4 to 6 weeks, something like that, with a friend. And that's been great too. And I think it would be really hard to have the ability to get up consistently every morning and to feel great and energized and able to do that if I was drinking a lot. So now I want to talk about how I failed at my quitting of alcohol last week in Malta, and sort of the feelings that I had around that, and the fear of shame and judgment, and where that came from, because this is sort of leading to sort of an additional big point and theme of this video beyond just talking about cutting back on or quitting alcohol. And that is about the tendency that I have, and I think a lot of people have, to sort of parade around your plans and initiatives for self-improvement before you've actually really done the work. How that relates is, of course, when I quit drinking in January, I told everyone about it. It almost became like half of my identity for several weeks. And part of it was semi-necessary, because I had to have an explanation for why I'm not drinking with the people that I used to drink with a lot. But there are other reasons, I think, reflecting back, that I did that. And I'll touch on after I talk about me starting to drink again last week, or having a few drinks. I wouldn't say that I'm drinking again, but we'll touch on it after I talk about how and why I did drink again last week. So let's go back there. So I was at my hotel in Malta early last week, and I won't get into the specifics of the phone call, but long story short, the phone call made me very happy and took a huge weight and burden off my shoulders. And with that phone call out of the way, I went to find my friends and family that I was in Malta with, and I found them at this little cafe and bar very near the hotel. And I sat down with them, and there were 2 Negronis on the table, which Negronis are my absolute favorite cocktail. I love them. And there were 2 just sitting there that had not been consumed by anyone yet. And in that moment, I felt incredibly tempted to just pick one up and start sipping on it, because I was so happy and I wanted to celebrate. I've never been someone that goes to alcohol when I'm feeling down or depressed or angry or anxious. I think there's something about that scares me. But I tend to do it much more so when I'm socializing or when I'm happy about something. And this was one of those cases where I was both socializing and really happy about this phone call that I had. And I wanted to drink, and I almost did, but then I didn't. And I'm glad I didn't. But that made me feel that there was a good chance that I may face temptation again on this trip. And so to bolster my ability to resist that temptation, I wanted to revisit with myself the reasons that I quit drinking. And we already talked about the reasons earlier in this video, but I'll just list them off again really quickly, which are to improve my sleep, to improve my mood, to lose fat, to help set up a new lifestyle, to exercise and gain muscle, to reset my dopamine, to be able to be social and have a good time and be fun while sober, and to detox my body. And as I wrote these things down, I sort of realized that I had accomplished those already. And I felt confident enough in myself that I could revisit alcohol without going off the rails and just binge drinking again, like I used to. And so I didn't immediately go and get a drink after I realized that. I more just sort of gave myself a pass that if I felt particularly inspired to have a drink at another point on that trip, that if I did get one, I could do it without feeling guilty or judgmental towards myself. And so I think it was maybe 2 days after that, after dinner, we went to this amazing cocktail bar, this whole group of us. And it was actually quite a funny experience because it was a really small cocktail bar, but there was a really big group of us. And we came here without any notice to the bar. And I realized immediately after we were funneling in that there really wasn't room for me inside this place. And I felt like, I'm just going to go back to the hotel and go to bed because it's late and I'm not drinking anyways. So what's the point of kind of trying to squeeze myself into this place? It really doesn't have room when I'm not even going to be a paying customer or doing what everyone else in there is doing. So as I'm getting ready to leave, the bartender, and I assume the owner of the establishment, because he seemed very passionate about what he did, but he came out and he was trying to stop me and be like, hey, no, we'll find a place for you. No, don't worry about it. And I told him, I was like, hey, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. But I actually gave up drinking at the beginning of the year. And he said, oh, good. I'm proud of you. Like, good job. And this is a guy I don't know. He was a Bulgarian dude named Stanislav. I guess it sounds like I know him now because I know his first name, but that's because I got to know him a little bit later in the night. But he said that he was proud of me for giving it up and thanked me for stopping by. And that was sort of that. But then a couple of my friends funneled out. There were a couple seats outside and we were just sort of hanging out there. I was like, all right, maybe I'll hang out with these guys for a minute before I head back to the hotel. And then one of my friends is reading the cocktail menu. And then he reads aloud 3-month barrel-aged salted Negroni. And I was like, what? Can I see the menu? Let me look at that. So I read about this drink, and in a funny sort of way, I felt like this barrel-aged cocktail was made for me because it had been barrel aging just about the same amount of time that I had not been drinking. So it sort of felt like we were made for each other, which probably sounds terrible. So I went back into the bar and I found Stanislav and I said, you know what? I changed my mind. I am going to have a drink. And he, without hesitation, said, congratulations. I'm so glad. So I proceeded to order this 3-month barrel-aged salted Negroni, and he brought it out to me. And I took a sip and savored it. And then I continued to do that for the rest of the drink. I think it took me about an hour and a half to consume that one drink because I really appreciated and thought about and savored and tasted every single sip, which is exactly the way that I wanted to drink after I had reset my relationship with alcohol, to really enjoy it. This was a masterfully constructed work of art made by this Bulgarian man that I was tasting and enjoying. And that was it. That's all I did. That's all I had. And I really enjoyed it. And I felt really good that I could do that and not sort of have an experience of the floodgates being opened and then continuing to drink. So I had similar experiences like that 2 or 3 more times in the week. I think I had a total of 4 drinks over the course of a week. And each time I really enjoyed it. I savored it, took forever to drink it because I was really thinking about every sip that I had. And so I came back from the trip feeling like, okay, this is great. I'm back in Florida now. I don't see myself drinking here anymore because this isn't a special occasion. I'm not traveling. And I sort of have a lifestyle here where I'm not really in bars much at all anyways. So it's just not really the right environment to even have any sort of temptation. But I did have a lot of fear about judgment from the myriad of people down here that I had boasted about my grand plans to quit alcohol for the entire year to. And I felt like they were definitely going to ask if I drank on the trip. And I felt like if I tried to explain it, that it would just make it sound worse. And I was sort of quite nervous about that, nervous about a couple people in particular. And then the funniest thing happened because sure enough, people did ask. And I said yes. And before I even had a chance to explain myself, their immediate reaction was, "Oh, good for you. Hey, glad you enjoyed it. Hey, what a great place to do it. Being in Malta and being with family and friends on this amazing trip. That's awesome." There was zero judgment. There was zero implications or comments about, "Oh, here we go again, back to old John," or any of that stuff that I was afraid of. And that was very eye-opening for me, and it made me really reflect on a few things. One of the things that made me reflect on is that no one really cares about what you do that much compared to yourself, which is probably really obvious to a lot of people, but I think it's really easy to forget that sometimes. At least it is for me, which is, I guess, a little embarrassing and shameful. But the truly shameful lesson that I feel like I learned here is that I think I, and probably a lot of other people out there, have a tendency to come up with these grand plans for self-improvement, whether it's a new workout plan, a new diet, quitting alcohol, quitting weed, or whatever it is. Come up with this plan. And the first thing you want to do is tell the people that you're closest to about it. And it's really easy to tell yourself you're doing this because you're excited about it and want to share it with people. And also that perhaps by sharing it with people close to you, it's helping create a container of accountability to help you stick with it. I think the underlying motivation here upon self-reflection, which really sucks, is that I think there, at least part of it, is the desire to get affirmation and validation and approval from people you care about, or for whose opinion you care about, without having actually done the work. So in other words, I can go around and tell all these people that maybe I want to impress, "Hey, I decided I'm quitting alcohol for the whole year. I know it's only, January 12th right now, but I'm quitting for the whole year." And I sort of get this, I can get this feeling of like validation and shock and approval, and, feel like they're impressed when I've actually only stopped drinking for 12 days or a month or whatever, depending on who I've told. But I get to present myself with this plan almost as if, "Hey, I've done this year already. How amazing is that?" And of course, that was not in the front of my head. I'm not even entirely sure if it was in the back of my head. The only thing that makes me think that this might have been somewhere in there is because of the fear I had of other people's judgment that I did drink last week, even though I feel like I wasn't judging myself. Like I reflected on it. I thought about it for a couple of days and made peace with it before I had that first drink. But I was still worried about what other people would think. And I think it's because of that. It's almost like I guess it's almost like a virtue signaling thing. Like, hey, look at me, look at this amazing thing I've decided to do, even though I haven't done it yet, but that still makes me super awesome that I decided to do this thing. So what's the lesson here? I don't want to make it something too black and white, but I did see a quote once, and I'm not sure who originally authored this, but this quote was, "Don't tell people your plans, show them your results." So what might this look like for me in the future? Well, if I do decide to do some new self-improvement thing, I really need to reflect on why I'm doing it and make sure I'm truly just doing it for me. Because if I am just doing it for me, I don't need to make that part of my public persona and identity and parade it around and boast about it to people to try to get approval or validation or affirmation. It should just be enough that I'm doing it for myself if I'm doing it for the right reasons. And then I'm truly just accountable to myself and to yourself as the person you should be most accountable to first anyways. So that has been my journey this year with alcohol. I've been back in Florida for a few days now, have not had any drinks, don't plan to anytime soon. But if I feel very inspired at some point this year at an amazing place with an amazing opportunity to try something I've never tried before, I might do it, and I'm going to feel good about it. Hopefully. Well, thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next time.